to the festival. My name is Sergio. I'm coming from Crear, Virtual Reality, a company based in Denmark. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about how content will develop, how virtual reality content will develop over the internet in the next couple of years. But first of all, I just wanted to tell you a little bit more about myself so we can get to know each other. My interest in virtual reality, yeah? Is it, okay, closer? Cool. So my interest in virtual reality actually started while I was doing my master thesis. I wanted to do something related to advertising, and I remember that I was perhaps like reading something about this new virtual reality coming up, emerging, and there was going to be a very big thing. But then, I think what really grabbed the hook, what I got really hooked on, was on this advert from Target, a retail company in the US, that basically featured this whole storyline where you were passing by this haunted house, and suddenly a crow came in, grabbed your phone, and went inside of the house. And then suddenly you had to explore all of the different departments of the house to search for your phone. And all of this was like a YouTube campaign. And I just remember the first time that I was in a library at CBS, and I was with my phone just looking at the movie, at the YouTube video, doing like this. So, oh, okay, so what's so special about it? And then I started tilting, and then I was, whoa! And then suddenly everybody at the library started looking at me, and I felt like this really weird dude with a phone. But it got me really hooked because it suddenly changed the whole perspective. It was using advertising in storytelling way and doing it in a really engaging way, so that you could explore the rooms, and then you were taken to the store and you were able to purchase every single item that you saw in this beautifully decorated room that they had. I mean, I know perhaps from a capitalist point of view, perhaps it's very beautiful, but that's my stand view. I love adverts, and that's why it kind of talked to me in that sense. That's when I actually decided to hop onto this medium and explore it a little bit more. So I did my master thesis around virtual reality and advertising, and then after that I landed an internship at Crear. Crear is as a business developer. So just to tell you a little bit more about Crear and what this is and who we are, basically. Let's start off with the name right off it. Crear actually comes from Plato. It's Plato used it to define the place between the existing and the non-existing. So if we roughly translate it, it can be like a place between the physical and the virtual worlds. So we have a bridge between those worlds. So I think that's actually defining the company as a whole, because it's like we are present in the physical sense. We have a shop in Copenhagen. We opened up the first virtual reality shop, and it also works as an innovation hub where people can come in, share ideas, and explore the technology in itself, and as a private consumer. But then we're also present on the virtual side by producing content and providing consultancy services for companies. Over the past year and a half, we've been having projects from different types of industries, from NGOs working with for marketing purposes, healthcare, architecture, education. So it has been very, very wide, and we have been showing that this technology can be used for so much more, and that's what we want to aim for, and we want to keep exploring this new medium. But the truth is that this medium is not new. I don't know if most of you know the history of VR, but I'll just make a brief overview of it. Just basically, this technology actually started in the 60s with this big old clunky machine, the Sensorama. There was this guy called Morton Heiling, and he wanted people to actually step inside of the cinema, inside of the movies. So he created this device where basically people had to be shut down from the entire world, and all you could see was like the movie in front of you. Actually, it was a pretty interesting machine because it already featured like 3D film and also featured like wind and smells that were thrown at you. So that was like pretty advanced for the time. But once you think about it, it's like you're not going to have this in your living room. Let's be honest. So obviously this wasn't ready. Like this weighed like 2 tons. But then in the 80s and the 90s, suddenly you had these, all of these companies, these gaming companies that wanted to start, that started to promise virtual reality headsets, like for our home. Suddenly, like the private consumer was able to access this wonderful technology. And journalists, of course, they started getting the hype of it, and they started to talk a lot more about and to write more about it, of how we are going to explore Mars, how we are going to explore dinosaurs, or are we going to explore real estate businesses overseas with virtual reality, so a lot of hype was being put into this technology, and perhaps the most iconic of the virtual reality headsets at the time was Nintendo's Virtual Boy. Basically, if you cannot see it, like it was this headset that you could basically had a mounting stand that you could place it on the table, and you had to peek into it, and this is what you could see inside. This was revolutionary at the time. Yeah, so basically, of course, it just wasn't good enough. Basically, this is very gimmicky, and it was just like a 3D game. So obviously, the technology couldn't keep up with all of this hype that was being built around it. And much more was being promised than what the technology could actually deliver. So it ended up becoming a failure. But now, fast forward to 2015, and this is what you have. Suddenly you have this headset that people use, and they interact with it very naturally. As if they were part of that world. And it's also such a powerful headset that can actually make you have these emotions. Like, very powerful ones. And it can even hack your brain so perfectly that can make you do things even though they are not real, like eating virtual donuts and opening up your mouth to do so. So it's like that's how crazy realistic this technology has become, and how powerful it is. So, what is virtual reality? Whenever I like to talk about this, to define it, I like to separate these two worlds, virtual from reality. And I start by focusing on reality part. And I'm just going to ask you a very simple question for a 10 a.m. talk. How can your brain know that what you are experiencing is real? Yeah?
Once what I hear, one technology expect that the only thing that makes you
and what causes those explosions in the brain, like those electrical explosions in the brain.
I suppose that is something about the way that we experiment dreams and not dreams. Perhaps in a schizophrenia person, this is something that is connected.
I don't want to make this very philosophical. I want to make this a little bit more practical in terms of, anyone wants to, I don't know, the answer that I'm looking for, it's basically in our senses, like you were grasping that. It's like basically it's our senses, through what we can see, through what you can hear, through what you can smell and taste.
Virtual reality gives the possibility to be more active.
Yeah. It is. But I mean, the whole idea of reality in itself, like that your brain can actually understand that, like, or make this sort of, can be comfortable with the idea that this, what you are experiencing right now, is real. It actually all comes down with what you are experiencing, what you are feeling, and all of your senses are capturing, because all of that's like your brain is being constantly stimulated. Like you have all of this audio stimuli, visual stimuli, and oral stimuli. Like you have all of this going on, and that's what causes like the brain those neural explosions in your brain, like those electrical impulses, and it's that your brain uses to make an understanding that this, what you are experiencing, is real. Now, I just want to make this, because it's a nice jump from the real reality that we have. That's what I was talking about. That's like experiencing reality, like nowadays through your senses, and that's basically you being stimulated by the world. But with virtual reality, it's basically, instead of having the world sending in those stimuli, you simply have a computer that it's doing that, and that it's creating all of those sort of the simulated world of stimuli that it's going into your brain and making you feel that you are actually present in one place. And that's the key component of virtual reality. It's like it's the ability of you being able to be transported to somewhere else. It's the ability for you to be in the center of the action and experience everything as if you were there. And that enables what you were telling as well, like that it becomes a lot more active and a lot more engaging as well, because people feel that they are there and that they can explore that world around them, even if it's just like looking around. But it gives them that impulse. It gives them that ability. So what you have is also by being able to transport someone else, it's that you have this capacity, this new communication tool at your disposal, and you can play around with the emotions as well of people in a much more empathic way, perhaps. And if we go back to research, if we focus, for example, on the Dale's cone of experience, which basically correlates the way that people perform a task to the way that they memorize things, we can see that virtual reality can have a huge impact on the memory part. So if we take a look at this inverted pyramid, this is basically a translation of Dale's cone of experience. Basically, if we start, roughly translated, this means that if we are performing a very abstract activity such as reading, that means that our brains can retain up to 10% of that information. But if we can make that activity a little bit more objective, such as like simulating the activity, which is what virtual reality can deliver, then that means that our brains can retain up to 90% of that experience. And I think that's very, very powerful. And that's also one of the key elements and abilities of virtual reality. What I want to specify a little bit more now It's about how all this is going to evolve over the internet. And in the next couple of slides, I'm just going to make this sort of retrospective. And I want you to take a look at these different websites and how have they evolved. And just think for a moment. This is Apple's website in '96. This is Apple's website today. Netflix. Netflix today. Oh. Vimeo. Vimeo today. It all looks so distant from now, right? But I mean, what has actually changed in all this? The answer is basically in the way that we communicate and the way that companies communicate. It all started from this very text-based. The internet was this depository of information where basically you just scrammed all of your text in there, and that was it. Because it was simple, like the bandwidth was also very limited. So basically, text was the main drive of the internet per se. So only a couple of years after, you started having companies working a lot, communicating a lot more with imagery. And right now you have companies that work a lot more with video. I mean, take Facebook, for example. It's very hard, like, just to be scrolling on Facebook and just not stop on a video. Like, that's how the internet works. Right now, video is king. But in a couple of years from now, virtual reality will take place, because we're changing from an information paradigm to a more experiential paradigm. What that means is that, for example, in terms of educational purposes, for example, if you want to go and browse and get to know a little bit more, for example, about the Great Wall of China, instead of going to Wikipedia and reading all of that text down there, you'll actually be able to step inside of the Great Wall of China and see how it looks like, and see the great battles that happened before you, and see everything unfold in there, and understanding much more vividly. And right now, for example, in education, what's being made for this, I just want to show you the Google Expeditions program, which I think that it's unbelievably cool. And it's also setting an example of how this will be used in there.
Where would you want to go?
I would like to go to the
Thailand, ancient Greece, India, to
Nigeria, my homeland, one or maybe all of the 7 wonders of the world.
When you explore different places, you have the chance to actually learn something new.
You want to be able to show the kids that there's something outside of your community that you could go to and learn from, and that there's other places you can visit.
All right, so let's do our objective and talk about the lesson for today.
We're going to take a field trip to Verona, Italy, to see the place where Romeo and Juliet lived.
I'm going to take you on this field trip under the water. Okay, you guys ready? Pick up your devices
And look in your cardboard.
What is this?
Would allow us to go somewhere we wouldn't normally be able to go.
This is the Great Wall of China.
We got to see the place itself so we could actually understand what she was talking about.
How long would it take to walk the length of the Great Wall of China?
How much more enriching than just showing them a picture or just having them read about it.
This device can actually make us go to places that we've never been before.
It brings the lesson to you. You have to see for yourself to believe it.
There's so much other places to see, so you know that it's never going to end.
So I think this is like a perfect example of how this is going to unfold in the education side of it. And but at the same time, if you think about like the regular consumer, for example, just for looking things up, on a do-it-yourself kind of basis. Instead of you having to go through all of those manuals and step-by-step sort of thing, you can perhaps like start practicing yourself with, for example, a 3D model of the device that you want to repair on your own, and see how everything unfolds together. I mean, from a technical standpoint for companies, it's also very valuable because, for example, if you're training your crew for reparation purposes, this can also be a very cheap way and a very more motivational wise way for them to do this sort of thing, and to understand exactly like what sort of components do actually go inside of everything, of such intricate objects, for example. But it's also, for example, going to be very interesting for training purposes. Instead of having manuals, people having to go over the internet and reading all of these massive manuals on, for example, how to repair things, repair railroads, for example, something a little bit more technical. They can just try it out on their own and be on the railroad tracks and experience that with a much more safer environment as well. And you start having companies, this is, for example, the example of a Russian railroad company that is starting to use virtual reality for simulation purposes. And I think that it's so amazing because it's like it provides a very safe environment, and at the same time it can mimic exactly the same movements as you would have in real life. So, and that's how real and how we will start having more of these experiences over the internet as the time moves along. Just wanted, yeah. But if we look, for example, from another point of view, for example, from the healthcare perspective, this can also be very impactful on mental illnesses. Instead of, for example, people having to go over through all of these medical research websites and trying to see, for example, how to cure phobias, you'll actually be able to, for example, do it on your home, like cure your phobia from home, instead of having to go and see a therapist for like over a year just to cure your fear of spiders. For example, just for you to understand how this is being used to treat phobias right now, it's the way that it's being done, it's with, you have therapists that place their patients under the virtual reality environments where, for example, if the person has afraid of spiders, then they will see a spider crawling up their hand. And at the same time, the therapist will also use a stick to give the more real feeling, the real sensation of actually the spider crawling up their hand. The person, the patient will know that that's not real, will know that it's not it's not there. The spider is not actually there, but the brain is seeing those things. The brain is feeling the touch of the stick, so that must be real for the brain. So it becomes but since it's not real, then the brain starts getting a little bit more comfortable with the idea of being around a spider, and that's how it works with phobia treatment using virtual reality. And it actually has been shown that, for example, the time span used in treating these diseases actually is much shorter than traditional therapy. So instead of having to go to someone else to do this, perhaps you'll be able to do this from your home as well, and diseases as such. Also, it will be very interesting to explore spaces, even though that you are not there, or even though that they do not exist. So instead of you having to go through listings and seeing all of these beautiful images of places that you don't know if they will be just like that, you'll perhaps be able to go to Airbnb and put on your goggles and see how the place actually looks like from the inside, and start experiencing the house before actually traveling there. I mean, I'm talking about Airbnb, but I can also be talking about, for example, renting accommodation for long term overseas. For example, if you're traveling to New York, like you're going to work there, you want to visit the place that you want to work, that you are going to work, or even you are going to live. So before renting out and before making out big decisions, like you should be able to do that from overseas. And I think like having these sort of advantages over the internet and having all of these sort of advantages being delivered right to you will start to become a lot more common in our daily lives. And it will be so much normal because it will also be able to impact, for example, our current online shopping experience. For example, you'll start having pop-up stores, you'll start having like virtual shopping stores, for example. I did as tried this already. I did this in Sweden, like with where you get a tour through the store and you have these icons hovering around and you are able to click on the objects and, for example, make the purchase right away. But the truth about our current online experience is that it's very efficient, and it's something that it's very easy for us to do. It's like everything's at the distance of a click. But the truth is, it's not experiential. It's not relevant for us. I mean, it's not the same thing as going to the store. It lacks that environment. It lacks the environment that you have from the brands at the store. So what you have here over the internet, like with virtual reality, is the possibility of creating more immersive and unique ways of shopping online for your customers. And that means, for example, if in the future, if you want to buy guns, you'll have something as extraordinary as this.
Lots of guns.
So it's sort of wacky, of course, but that's just how crazy we can be shopping right now. Like you could be just like floating some guns, or just playing around with opening up a book and playing around with the beautiful dragon that walks out of it. So that's how fabulous it can be. And even in terms of, for example, advertising, I think it will change as well. Because, okay, let's face it, like if we are starting to browse the internet using our virtual reality headsets, companies will have to start betting a lot on advertising. And you'll be popped out with bombarded with a lot of adverts as well. So what you have right now today, it's like you have these adverts that are very that you have these unique storytelling ways of seeing these things. And I think the adverts that really stick out are the ones that play around with your emotions as well, such as, for example, the magical Sony Bravia one that everybody knows here with the bouncing balls. But what you have, what I believe that will become a lot more unique and a lot more powerful for brands will also be the way of creating unique experiences for the customers as well. And such as, for example, the one that we did for Dong Energy. So Dong Energy, it's a company, it's your basic boring energy company. But what they did is they wanted to create this experience of going to an offshore windmill farm and give it out to their consumers, and at the same time educate them on the importance of the offshore windmill farms in Denmark, and at the same time renewable energies. So they created this experiences and created events around town for their consumers to also change their perspective, and it was just fabulous for them because they were also able to this was viewed over 1 million times over the internet, and it was a really nice experience for them because they were able to start telling a story in a more engaging way as well, and more relevant for their consumers. And I believe that we will start having a lot more of these over the internet in the next couple of years. Now, what I believe that it's actually going to start, what is actually the pinnacle of the social, the sort of experiential internet, it's actually the social aspect of it. And when we start seeing Facebook betting a lot on the social experience part, it's just marvelous to see. I just wanted to share a couple of minutes with you, the first live demo that they did with the Facebook Spaces, where they can actually, where you start having interactions with people inside of virtual reality environments, which I think that it's just incredible. And this is basically going to set the stone in the experiential internet. So here it is.
First live demo in VR. All right.
The sound is okay, but if you cannot hear it,
We are in virtual reality right here at Oculus Connect. Hey guys, how's it going?
Hey, Mark, it's great to see you.
Hey, Mark. Even though you're cartoons, it's pretty amazing that our minds can just automatically understand the facial expression, so I can understand what you're feeling right now.
Right. So we can actually make eye contact. Our mouths move when we talk, so we know who's speaking in the room. I can even make expressions. I can smile. I can look surprised. Oh. I can look confused.
You're making those sound effects right now.
That's me. I can even laugh if you say something funny. Here, take a look at your own avatar.
Whoa, why did you make me look like a young version of Justin Timberlake? That's, because we're in virtual reality, we're here together, and we have the space where we can just do whatever we want, right? So do you want to go somewhere?
Yeah, let's. In fact, how about I take us to the bottom of the ocean?
Sounds good. All right.
Sharks.
Those are sharks. All right. That's a lot of sharks.
All right, how about we go somewhere else? How about we go to another planet, say Mars?
All right, guys, how about we go somewhere where there's some more people? You know, that's kind of my thing. What about Facebook offices?
That
Great
sounds
idea.
great.
All right. Okay. All right, here we are, back. Back on Earth. All right, so here we go. This is my office and then at Facebook. You know, the point of this, and the reason why we're here, is to talk about how, you know, we have this space together in VR, and how we can go do anything that we want together, right? So, you want to play a game?
Oh, that sounds great. Let's try a quick game of cards, huh? There we go. Okay. Two for you, two for you, and
All right, what are we playing?
Let's just do a quick game of high card. Ready? Flip them over on three. 1, 2, 3.
I win.
Out there. Let's see. Oh!
Oh, man.
Nice.
I barely ever won in demo practice, so, you know,
We didn't plan that at all.
Well, another game we can play might be chess. Now, I'll go first. Queen to center a board.
I'm not sure what to do with that. In virtual reality, you can make any move you want, apparently, but, all right.
How about
here you go.
something completely different?
You know, when I was in school, I actually used to fence. You got another one of these?
I can do one better. Check this out. I will just make my own. Draw this real quick. Like this. Go like so. And then go zoop, like that. All right. I'm good. Aha. Swish, swish. Clang, clang. Aha.
All right.
Oh, another thing we can do together would be just watch a simple video. Now, unlike on the phone, I can zoom this up to any size we'd like. Check it
There
out.
you go, that's-
Somewhat like our own private movie theater. He looks so happy.
Yeah, I think this is starting to show like exactly how live and how crazy the internet can become, and how we will start having all of these crazy, wacky experiences, and how we will need to also start focusing a lot more on these universes that we create around those experiences. So, having said this, yeah, I'm very looking forward for this exciting future that we have ahead. So if you have any questions, just feel free to pop them up now. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
I want to be the bad guy here, right? My question is, it seems like obviously you are trying to sell all these good experiences about virtual reality.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be any bad thing about it, right? Because what we are saying, like, I understand the purposes of training and all that kind of things that could help someone at some point, like training, education, and stuff like that. Also, we are talking about consumerism, and we are talking about do less things outside than inside. So it's like becoming all the things of the video games that we were used to complain about and put in reality. So what is the point here? I guess it's for all the consumers, right? They got both sides. So it's kind of like got like kind of that feeling of it's not right, but it's cool, but not right at the same time. So
no, I completely understand your point, and I agree that there's like there's a perverse aspect of this technology that we are not perhaps foreseeing right now, and I think you're right, because it's like we have this technology that suddenly starts to talk to our primal brain, like to the inner reptile in us, and start making us, for example, start eating virtual donuts and opening up our mouths, and that's a bit crazy. And for example, once you start having like corporations that wants to start affecting that on a consumer level, I think that's like there needs to be a boundary in there somewhere, definitely. And it's, but I still, up until this moment, I think that like we're in this very beautiful blossoming age of this technology, where I think people are just doing beautiful things with it, and creating it for very interesting purposes, besides those nefarious effects. And I think that in the end, people will start seeing this more of a technology that will help us in the good side. More, the good side will overturn the bad side, and that's always how it will be when technology disrupts us. I mean, we saw it with the internet, for example. I mean, we have all of this beautiful thing of being able to go online and chat with our friends, but at the same time, we have that nefarious part of it where we have predators online that are stalking people. So it's like with every technology, it's like there's a good and a bad side of it, and you just have to wait in the balance and put those things on a scale and just decide. But I think the good things will definitely come out out of this. Yeah, no, please.
For me, I'm very ignorant of virtual reality, so it's quite
Yeah.
interesting. I've got a couple of things. One is, when you went with your inverted pyramid, you said about the experience of reading is less, let's say, absorbable than the experience of virtual reality. So does that mean, for example, if you're reading To Kill a Mockingbird, you would get like 10% of what you're reading, but if you experience that, you go and shoot To Kill a Mockingbird, and you experience it as virtual reality, you'll get much more out of the story. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I mean, if we cross with the Dale's kind of experience, this was actually like an experiment done in the 80s. There's a research paper done on this, and if we see this according to his research, then we can definitely say this. Like we can say that it will be more impactful for us to actually experience How to Kill a Mockingbird, and be on the set and see exactly how it was back then, and so on.
So another question I have.
Yeah.
When we're seeing that thing about with Mark Zuckerberg, so Lucy's mind, because I'm completely ignorant how you actually do it, I'm thinking from the producer's point of view.
Yeah.
So Lucy's mind
Of course.
Simple answer to that. How do you shoot that? Simple answer in real time.
Yeah, okay. So just in a nutshell, did you see Mark Zuckerberg okay, that was the base thing. Like he was having the headset, and then he had, you might have not noticed, but he was having like this sensor over there. And the sensor was capturing the headset, and at the same time, he was wearing some controllers, okay? And what the sensor does is like to capture all of that and translate that into the virtual world. And so what you were seeing were avatars, representations of those people that were in a separate room somewhere else. They were people. They were people.
So they had to react somehow. It was just the process.
It was. They were just like, the thing is that, for example, the controllers, they also enable, for example, they have sensors on the fingers, like they can see exactly, for example, if you point to somewhere, like it will also translate that into the character, into the avatar. So that's why it felt also very realistic. I'm a bit unaware of how they did with the whole facial expression thing, but I don't know if this was like the consumer version that they have right now. But for example, Oculus, they've been purchasing companies that are working, for example, in eye tracking, for example. And facial expression tracking. So if you have all of these sensors built in the headset, it's easy to translate that. So that's basically where it is. Yeah, of course.
Sorry. As a producer who's only shot, what I call traditional filmmaking.
Yeah.
You shoot, whatever, and you see it on TV after you edit and post-produce. Is the method of shooting for virtual reality very different?
No, it's pretty similar, but I think that you have to take into consideration a lot, for example, and the whole aspect of the environment and the whole camera thing. I think the major coming up again. The major key difference is it's also in the camera, because you're suddenly like, you don't have a director that's basically telling exactly like where you want to frame, like where do you want your audience to have the attention on, you know?
Where does the director fit into
There is a role in there, because it's like, even though that he cannot do this, he can give you some clues and guide you into it. So for example, you have some techniques, such as, for example, creating movement to attract attention. If you have, for example, a ball that is swinging by, like just running by across the field around you, like most of the people will follow the ball and where it will move, where it will lead to. So that's, for example, setting the attention to that point over there. You know, or for example, if you highlight, like if you create, for example, lighting environments more bright on an area and darken out the other parts, people will most likely be guided to that direction. But the thing is, it's like not 100%. You won't know 100% that people will be looking in there. So it's because you cannot control them. You can guide their attention, try to guide their attention, but it's still up to them to decide what they want to see. So I think that it's the major difference. It's also thinking about the environments in itself, like the worlds that you are shooting in, and the things that you are doing. Because afterwards, in terms of a shooting process and so on, in post-production part and so on, it differs only in terms of the stitching also, and because you need to stitch the images, and perhaps also like in the way that you're editing, because you need to think, for example, where you need to center the action, so that, for example, if you center your action here, and you have I'm getting way too specific on this. I'm so sorry. I don't know if you want me to dive into it, but for example, if you have a band that is playing over here, a guy with a banjo, and so obviously, and if you cut and you make a frame, and suddenly you are at this beach, but you're standing at the tree, and the whole beach and the swimmers are like on the other side, people might not notice that the swimmers are on the other side. So you need to, for example, change the whole action for the swimmers and the beach part to be here in front of you and the tree on the back. So you have to think of all of those aspects. It's like, it's a little bit more tricky in that sense, but it's still like in terms of, yeah, but in terms of the regular production part, it's pretty much the same. It differs in those aspects, more or less, yeah. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, there's another question back.
How you foresee the future, because you show us how you were in '96 in those websites with different modules of the business. And my question is, how you foresee how is going the storytelling that our colleague was asking a minute ago? Because so far what we have is the experience for every single thing we want to do. Every single thing. I want to be in Thailand, I want to jump from a parachute, I need to practice sex, everything is there. But there is no story involving about my reactions. So far, what we have is a new way to communicate to our brain. It's going to be for the future. But even for the future, it can be done through a pill that, like Total Recall, we can get those memories, fake or true, and it doesn't matter because it's memories. And you can visualize whatever we want to explain in our brains. So far, is a way to communicate to our brain. What I want to know from you is how, as creators, we can develop stories for our potential consumers, buying stories, the traditional stories, cinematographically, audiovisually, that bringing the persona as a main character in the middle of the story, in the 360 experience, and then we're going to be obliged to shoot, not as a frame, as a 360 experience. So how you foresee that? How we can do that? How we can tower that? Not being in the hands of publicity or just for a simple experience or just a training purpose or healthcare thing.
I think that, first of all, what you're talking about.
That's the point we are. That's the point we are now.
The point that we are right now, I think that it's like that question that you're asking about, like the storytelling in 360 video and virtual reality, it's still the holy grail of this industry. Nobody knows exactly how to do it. Like it's still a very wild west, and people are experimenting a lot with it. And right now, like we are using techniques that are being used in film right now. But what you have is also people are seeing that some techniques that don't actually, some filming techniques don't actually apply to the 360 format. So it's simply, I believe that we are like in the beginning of this whole industry and the beginning of this whole medium, that we are just starting to explore how to communicate with this, like how the Lumiere brothers started. And this is just, I cannot foretell exactly how it will be, but definitely.
So we have the format for TV live, because we can do a TV format live, having all players and having for the audience a TV format. We have it there. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg is proving that. We have at this point a prime time show. You can have a late night show, and character and interactive in that way. But it's live.
Yeah.
It's not something that you can really interact with the storyline.
Exactly. I mean, there's definitely like, I believe that it's starting to open up also, for example, for the possibility of you being able, since it's a format where you will practically have this decision power of looking anywhere you want to go. Perhaps you can also start creating like more diverse storylines where, for example, you start having choices, like you have the audience starting to become more active in that role of, for example, I don't want to go this way, I want to go that way, and I want to explore the dragon in the dungeon down there instead of the little princess on the top of the tower. So it's like and you can, for example, create and start thinking more in that sense of how decisions in video will, or in virtual reality, will affect the outcome of it. And what I see is like it's emerged right now. what I see is that we're starting to see a merge between the filming and the gaming industries, a lot more in that, and because you have all of these virtual elements that are on games that basically they spend months and years just developing these characters, these worlds, and suddenly they are very experts and keen on the ability of the players being able to perform actions and be able to perform random things and affecting the outcome of the game in the aftermath. And I think that it's like it's definitely one of the ways like to cooperate with these sort of industry. Like you have the filming that it's very powerful to convey emotions and to and people and the narrative part of it. And at the same time, you have these gamers, these really hardcore gamers that are very knowledgeable on how we need to, as a person, to act, to interact, and to do things, and also to explore the environment. So if you start mixing these two up, I think you will start to become having more of these very powerful storytelling environments and experiences. And suddenly you start having Westworld in virtual reality, for example. So that's more or less how I can see that this is going to be shaped down. If I answered your question a little bit more.
With the game, I'm foreseeing the escape rooms. Escape rooms
Yeah.
where you can do experience with the storyline and using the game world, so it's okay.
Yeah, for example.
Escape rooms is a good example, for example.
Yeah. So, but it's impossible for me to tell you besides experiences, because what I think that it's also going to drive this, it's also the ability of creating these unique experiences for people to go, for example, on the backstage and see like Paul McCartney playing, rehearsing on the backstage before going on a concert, or doing all these sort of intimistic environments, intimate moments for the audience, for the viewer, so they can have a much more a much deeper connection with also not the brands, but also with everything, with artists. So I believe there's also like a huge potential in there, and it's hard for me to say that I think that both will also come, will rise, and yeah. Sorry, we had one last question, but
we need to move to
okay.
Next. So I propose that if someone has a question, maybe we will do a next coffee break, short coffee break, and maybe you can. Yeah, but now we need to give pass to Rota. So thanks very much.
Of course, thank you. Thanks.